Wallis Simpson has always been a polarizing figure when it comes to the royal family. Unfavorable rumors have circulated about her for decades, that she was a social climber, communist, and anti-Semite, just to name a few. But were the rumors true? Wallis Simpson, born Bessie Wallace Warfield, grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and both of her parents came from wealthy families. It was whispered that her father, Teakle Wallace Warfield, and her mother, Alice Montague, had conceived Simpson out of wedlock. In fact, Simpson would later lie about when her parents were married to avoid scandal. She never met her father, who died of tuberculosis when she was 5 months old, leaving her mother to raise her solo. Without her father, both mother and daughter were in a vulnerable state and had to rely on his family's charity. Wallis Simpson and her mother moved in with her father's brother Solomon Davies Warfield shortly after her father's death. Simpson's uncle paid for her to attend the prestigious girls' college prep school Oldfields in Maryland. They were forced to leave Solomon Warfield's care, however, when he allegedly made inappropriate advances toward Alice, leaving them stranded and financially cut off. Alice then moved them both into a cheap hotel. She would sew beautiful ensembles for Simpson to wear, always mirroring the latest fashions. She didn't want her daughter to miss out on gaining a suitable match from Baltimore's high society. And if that was Simpson's only card to play in life due to their newfound circumstances, she was luckily a very popular figure with the gentleman. Amidst the familial turmoil, Wallis attended Baltimore's 1914 bachelor's cotillion, as it was time for her to begin courting suitors. Biographer Philip Ziegler wrote in the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography, "Though Wallis's jaw was too heavy for her to be counted beautiful, her fine violet blue eyes and petite figure, quick wits, vitality, and capacity for total concentration on her interlocutor ensured that she had many admirers." Simpson seemed to have a lot going for her, but her uncle seemed to be hell-bent on taking her down a peg or two. Her uncle said he would not be paying for her own coming-out ball, alluding to the World War that was raging in Europe. The overt and hurtful gesture further scarred the young Simpson. Wallis Simpson was introduced to her first husband, naval aviator Earl Winfield Wynne Spencer Jr., while visiting her cousin Corrine Mustin in Pensacola, Florida in 1916. They were married shortly after their introduction, but it would not be a happy marriage. Spencer was unfortunately an alcoholic, and their marriage was incredibly unstable. Spencer traveled often with the Navy, visiting both coasts in America and later China. Simpson traveled with Spencer to China, though they would begin their estrangement at this time. Simpson is said to have had a, quote, lotus year in China, traveling the country without her husband. While still married to Spencer, Simpson had the chance to attend a party attended by Prince Edward, though it is thought that they did not meet there. While in San Diego, Wallis and Spencer attended a ball at the Hotel del Coronado in 1920, but Edward and Wallis wouldn't actually become acquainted until years later. Wynne Spencer's drinking problem led Simpson to stray into the arms of an Argentine diplomat. It was relatively easy to have affairs, as she and her husband were parted for long stretches of time due to the nature of Spencer's work. When she traveled to China, Simpson supposedly became privy to many practices which were uncommon for women in the West, such as opium, brothels, and gambling. She is also rumored to have had an affair with Count Galeazzo Ciano while in Beijing. Ciano would eventually become Italian dictator Benito Mussolini's son-in-law. None of these rumors have ever been proven and could all be attempts at smearing the controversial figure. Many had a motive to do so. After a rocky union, Simpson and Spencer finally split for good, divorcing in 1927. They were married for 11 years. After her first divorce and before her epic romance with the future King of England, Wallis Simpson married Ernest Aldrich Simpson, a shipping executive and former officer in the Coldstream Guards. But there was a problem with their prospective marriage. Not only was Wallis still married, but so was he. What was Ernest's appeal to Wallis? He had dual citizenship, for one. Ernest was American-born but had earned British citizenship during World War I. Ernest divorced his first wife in order to marry Wallis, and they tied the knot in 1928. But it would be a rocky road toward marital bliss, with the stock market crash and Wallis's mother's death, both in 1929. What's more, just 3 years after their union, Wallis would meet Edward. She was formally introduced to Edward in 1931 by Lady Thelma Furness, who was rumored to be Edward's mistress at the time. Soon, Wallis and her husband would start visiting the prince at small gatherings, and a trusting Ernest would go to bed early as Wallis and Edward stayed up talking until the early morning hours. Wallis Simpson and Edward became incredibly chummy. Soon, it became clear to Wallis's husband, Ernest Simpson, that she and Edward were becoming more than just friends. Edward became obsessed with Wallis, according to Anne Sabah's book, That Woman. Those around them knew of the affair, and both Ernest Simpson and the royal family waited patiently for the tryst to pass. Even Wallis admitted later that she would have rather just been his mistress. Some say Ernest even threatened to kill himself if she left. Nevertheless, Wallis and Ernest divorced in October 1936. Wallis and Edward wasted no time getting hitched after she was legally back on the market. The new Duke and the Duchess of Windsor were married on June 3, 1937 at a quiet French chateau. Queen Mary, Edward's mother, seemingly never forgave the union, writing to him in a letter, "It seemed inconceivable to those who had made sacrifices during the war that you, as their king, refused a lesser sacrifice." Wallis would be blamed for years for destroying the monarchy's reputation. Wallis Simpson's debaucherous time in China and her multiple rumored affairs were used as social ammunition against her when she and Prince Edward became involved. When the rumors of her past behavior reached the Queen Mother and Prime Minister, they were rumored to have dredged up an infamous dossier, which supposedly detailed her lewd and immoral behavior while she was abroad. The document is said to have detailed descriptions of sexual practices she learned while living in Shanghai, which the royal family claimed she was using to ensnare Edward into marriage, though the Duke paid these allegations no mind. When Edward announced his intentions to marry Simpson to the then British Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin in 1936, Baldwin denied his blessing, proclaiming that the public would never approve of a divorced woman becoming queen, let alone one with such a reputation. At some stage, other options were offered to Edward, including a, quote, morganatic marriage through which Simpson could become Edward's legal wife, but never his queen. The rumored dossier never materialized, though it was possibly more powerful as a rumor than a published document. In his book, The Duchess of Windsor, The Secret Life, biographer Charles Higham wrote, "It is a fascinating subject of conjecture, impossible to authenticate at this stage." The scandalous dossier did not stop the love affair between Wallis and Edward. Edward and Wallis Simpson were rumored to be seriously involved well before his coronation. Both the royal family and elite members of English society were aware of the romance. Many speculate that Edward saw Simpson as an escape hatch from the monarchy. According to British biographer Andrew Morton, who wrote Love, The Untold Life of the Duchess of Windsor, The Women Who Changed the Monarchy, Edward never wanted to be king. He and Wallis were tragically at cross purposes. Only a few months after being declared King of England, Edward announced their engagement, sending the country into a constitutional crisis. After tussling with various alternatives to the union back and forth with high governmental and monarchical officials, there were no compromises Edward could agree to. In an interview with Kenneth Harris in 1970, Wallis was asked if she had any regrets about anything in her life. She said,
"Oh, about certain things, yes, I wish it could have been different. But I mean, I'm extremely happy and..."
Stuck between a rock and a hard place, forced to choose between the woman he loved and the crown, Edward chose her, and the rest is history. When Edward announced his intention to marry Wallis Simpson, the royal family was very displeased. The harassment and public pressure for the lovers to split got so bad that Wallis Simpson sent Edward letters begging him to give up. One anonymous letter threatened Edward and Wallis, saying, "Edward is a rotten swine asking us to pay for emeralds and fine things for his ugly. If that Yankee harlot does not get out, we will smash her windows and give her a hiding." In other words, the threats weren't subtle. Nevertheless, Edward persisted and was determined to renounce his birthright to marry her. However, this wasn't the only difficulty. When Wallis traveled back to the States to procure her divorce from Ernest, the judge apparently threatened not to grant it on the basis of adultery. Wallis recalled, "For a terrible moment, I felt sure he was determined to deny me my divorce." According to Anne Seba in That Woman, Wallis wrote to Ernest amid their divorce proceedings and even during their honeymoon with Edward, once saying, "I think of us so much, though I try not to." Even so, Wallis and Edward were married, but their fairy tale had already begun to sour as the couple traveled to Germany. Unfortunately, both Wallis Simpson and Edward had ties to the Nazi Party pre-World War II. This affiliation would cause much distress, not only with the public, but with the government, leading to more espionage. The couple would make trips to nearby European countries, including Germany, where Edward met with Adolf Hitler and was honored by Nazi officials in 1937. There was even a kidnapping plot concocted by the Nazis to put Edward back on the English throne to act as a spy, but luckily it never materialized. This involvement caught the attention of then-President Franklin Roosevelt and the FBI. When Simpson and Edward visited the States in 1941, J. Edgar Hoover launched a covert intelligence operation on the exiled Duke and Duchess, who had reason to suspect they both favored the Nazis. Simpson was also rumored to have had a particularly involved affair with a German army officer and German ambassador to Britain, Joachim von Ribbentrop, who apparently sent her 17 red roses, one for every time they allegedly slept together. What history has attempted to portray as a star-crossed romance for the ages wasn't as blissful as sometimes presented. Once Edward abdicated, there was no future for him and Wallis Simpson in England, and the couple never returned to live there. Believe it or not, they didn't have much money either. Edward's royal allowance was cut from the budget, and they were without a country and without jobs. Sprinkle some fascist leanings into the mix, and their lives post-World War II were pretty bleak. When asked if he would have liked to have had another job after abdication, Edward said,
"Yes, I offered my services if they were required. Never got any."
By the 1960s, they were nearly forgotten within the international conversation and grew increasingly bitter toward the royal family's cold shoulder. In a 2012 article, Politico wrote of Simpson, "She became eternally frustrated that she no longer held the interest of people at high levels of society, government, or the arts." There were also talks of another affair Simpson was having with Herman Rogers, a close friend of Simpson's from China, who even gave her away at her and Edward's wedding. While it's been romanticized by pop culture, In That Woman, author Anne Seba says of Wallis and Edward's infamous union, "It was more like a gothic fable where a Faustian pact with the devil ends with the moral, be careful what you wish for." Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.